Okay, so we're going to do an update on Pablo, and you can tell me what's been going on, or we can talk about it while I play the video and look at it.
Oh, I can give you a bit of an update. So we've had quite wet, stormy weather over the last month here. So I haven't been able to do as much with him. So the ultimate, I suppose, is to do 4 times per week. I hardly ever get there. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two,
Yeah.
sometimes it's three, depending. But it's been more like 1 or 2 times per week. So I don't know whether that's had a bit of something to do with it, not just being being able to do it enough. As well as it's been quite cold. Well, when I say cold, it's kind of gets down to about maybe 6 degrees
That's cold.
Celsius. That's cold. And then sometimes it's raining as well. And so, he's out in the paddock. So whether or not he's feeling a bit cold and achy, I don't know. But he's been one time when I took him in the arena, he literally just wouldn't move. We went right back to as if when we
Yeah.
first started, he just would not walk. He's very uh, annoyed if I go near him with a brush, or I can't brush him at the moment. He pins his ears, he gets really sassy and swishes his tail and like turns around to try to bite me, just
Hmm.
saying, just don't touch me,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
I knew that he doesn't like rugging, but given the weather, I thought I might just try and see what he's like. So I put the rug just over him, and he was so annoyed. He was so pissed. Like I thought, okay, we won't do that.
So you
So
didn't get one on him?
no, I mean,
Yeah.
I could force it on. I could obviously get my daughter to hold his head out the way so he doesn't lunge and bite at me, but he really hates it, really hates it. So I thought, okay, well, you can be cold. So,
Yeah, and that's a tricky one because he might not like the blanket because of the skin sensitivity, but like
mm,
I'm pretty quick to put rugs or blankets on horses um if they are kind of stiff, old, arthritic, or have some
yeah,
kind of health compromised issue, just
yeah,
because it can make a difference when you work them in the winter. And
yeah,
I'm not sure what to say. If he really hates it, I don't know that I would push it, see how he
mm.
does. But if he doesn't improve, maybe try leaving it on him for like on a really cold night, or maybe even for
Yeah,
12 to 24 hours, and see if he doesn't change his mind.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it's funny because when I had him, he was down at an adjustment centre last year for a while, and the lady was rugging him then. Now I don't know whether she just put it on and left it on. That could be the case because I think she had, I don't know, 80 horses or something in
Oh.
adjustment, so perhaps that was the case. But I said, "Oh, how is he to rug for you?" And she's like, "Oh no, he's fine." I'm thinking, why does he do it to me? Why is it that he I feel like he really views me as I'm the bottom of the pecking order. So he's saying, don't be touching me. Whereas maybe someone else can come along, put his rug on, and he just doesn't do anything to them.
Well, horses are funny. They kind of pick on our weak areas. They have a way of
Mm.
sussing out their particular humans' weak spots. And so
Yeah.
if you doubt yourself, he goes, "Yeah, doubt yourself. You're wrong." You know what I mean? And it's almost like
Yeah.
they push on those little, or they scratch those little
Gaps.
areas that we have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in a way, it teaches us to grow through them or overcome them.
Mm.
But it doesn't matter if it's self-confidence or some other issue. But I think between you and Pablo, where you worry about doing the wrong thing, he goes, "Yeah, you're doing the wrong thing." And he just sort
Yeah.
of,
And he says it so loud and so big, it's like, okay, okay, well, I won't do it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just
And it,
don't know how to respond to him. So for instance, um, if I am trying to put a rug on and he's getting really pissy, I mean, I'd have to either have someone hold his head or tie him up fairly tight because otherwise he'd be lunging at me. That's how annoyed he is.
yeah,
And I feel that because I've given him a voice, which is obviously very important, the minute I don't listen to him he
He gets louder.
gets even more annoyed because he's like, hang on a minute, you normally listen to me, and what are you doing? Oh, my husband is getting something out of the bin there. um,
But it's
yeah,
something it's also like if you look at um the intelligence level of horses is maybe the equivalent to a human teenager. Like
yeah,
they definitely have opinions. They're definitely intelligent. They can definitely think for themselves, but they don't have a long view of the future. Like they don't,
no,
where as we mature, we can factor in the future where teenagers are still don't have a lot of forward thinking. And that's kind of how horses' brains work. And so sometimes where I have had somebody hold a horse and the horse kind of fussed and definitely didn't like having the rug put on. I keep
hmm
saying blanket too. That's the American term, but
oh yeah, blanket, yeah, that's fine,
rug
yeah,
blanket.
yeah,
The same horse, after wearing it a couple of cold nights, had a complete change of opinion. Like that's
mm,
not unusual. And I think the hardest little equid I ever had to put a blanket on was a little miniature donkey who was terrified of it and having none of it. And
oh,
it really took some patience. And she was still scared of it. The first week we were putting it on, but the weather was really getting cold and she was shivering. And so after I think maybe even 3 days to 5 days of taking it off during the day, putting it on at night, she got to where she
yeah,
just came to her blanket and wanted it on.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so it can change like that, even if it's a bit of a rough start. So
I mean,
if it,
he has been rugged quite a bit in the past. So he's now 10, and I probably maybe for the last 2 years I haven't really rugged him much. Mainly because of his behavior, and it's hard. Like if I'm trying to rush off to work,
yeah,
um, you know, taking the rug off and all that jazz, it's kind of, I'm thinking, well, if he really doesn't like it and kind of suits my timeline in a way. But I get what you're saying as far as if it's potentially going to be beneficial to his body, maybe I should kind of persist a bit more.
he might change his mind. Like what could be
Yeah.
bothering him is the act of putting it on is like brushing, and he doesn't like being brushed.
Mm.
So he might be fussy. It's usually they're less fussy when you take it off because you're not kind of going against the hair and fussing too much. You can just sort of pull it off. But when you're putting it
Yeah.
on and fastening everything, it can kind of move and be the equivalent of like brushing. And so if he
Mm.
doesn't like being brushed, he's probably not going to
Mm.
be too happy about it being put on. But
Mm.
if it helps him, like if he's loose in his joints and he's struggling to move forward, horses that lose forward always have a level of discomfort, right? Or not
Mm.
necessarily pain, but a level of discomfort that could be skeletal related to something like arthritis or muscular just from having to hold the muscles so tight because the skeleton isn't very stable. And in
Yeah.
in either case, keeping them a bit warmer seems to
Mm.
help, even
Yeah.
though it's not a necessity. Like he can work
Yeah.
through it. It just means that if he's not getting worked as often, maybe if you could schedule longer periods of work, he's going to take
Hmm.
twice the amount of time he used to warm up.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah. And what temperature would you put a rug on? What would it get down for you before you?
So people laugh at me because I mean, when you live in a super hot climate, whether it's dry like you or, humid like mine, what happens
Yeah.
is the pores on the skin begin to enlarge because that's how we can cope with high heat. And so
Yes.
the horses do the same thing. Their pores sort of enlarge. And then
Mm-hmm.
what we get is we don't really get a winter. We get hot, 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 cold front. And then it gets hot, hot,
Right.
hot, cold front. And so when we get
Okay.
we get a cold front that comes through, our temperatures can just plummet by 20, 30 degrees. And so
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so that's why it's our colic season, because the horses
Yes.
will eat a lot of hay, but they won't drink a lot of water, and the
Yeah.
barometric pressure changes. And so I'm trying to think what it would be in Celsius. In
I
Fahrenheit,
can Google it. What's it in Fahrenheit? And I'll
Fahrenheit, I put the blankets on between 50 and 60 degrees, which is going to be really warm.
so 10 degrees Celsius.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and that just sort of depends. If your winter kind of comes in slowly and you get a fall and the temperature's low during the day and at night, like it is in the northern states in the US, then
Yeah,
I like when I lived in a colder climate, I wouldn't put blankets on until 40 degrees because the horses
right.
were more
Yeah.
acclimated to the cold. So that might be
Yes.
more like,
Yeah.
the 5 or 6 degree
40
mark.
is oopsie. Sorry.
I
Oh
would think,
yes, 4.5, 4.5 degrees.
yeah. So that's
Yeah.
about where you're at the six
Although,
degrees Celsius.
yeah, our winter, so we get quite warm days still. We'll have probably about 16. Like today, I think it's going to be 20. So during the day, it's not cold. Or
Yeah,
some days we get coolish, but not cold. So it gets warm, probably too warm to have a coat on, but
yeah,
then the nights they get cold.
yeah,
Yeah. In fact, we can go down to like 0, -1 sometimes, very
yeah,
rare, but yeah, it gets cold.
yeah. So that's
Okay.
a
Yeah.
it's a on-off blanketing
Mm,
issue. And so,
yeah.
it may be, maybe he's happier with a light under blanket and only a heavier one going on, but a lighter one staying on. There's all kinds of ways you could play with it. But the only thing that would be interesting regarding his training and his level of crankiness would be
Mm,
if you have a helper to try it for, say, 3 to 7 days in a row overnight, he
yeah.
might he might change his opinion about it. He might sort of go, "Oh, I can cope with the putting on part because I like how I feel once it's on."
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
he gets worse, if he gets more defensive in those 3 to 5 sort of trial days, then I would
Mm-hmm.
stuff it and go, "Yeah, never mind, you're on your own."
Yeah. 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 Yeah,
Mhm.
because he's so pissy. And I'm thinking, I don't think he'd kick, but you never know, do you?
No, I
You
would
never
have a
know what.
helper. You never know what, and you just don't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It might not even be aimed at
Mm,
you. But
yeah.
if
Yeah.
he's getting frustrated and cranky, he could kick out, and you just don't want to be in the wrong place.
No,
So I
halfway
would,
under his belly trying to put his leg straps on.
yeah, exactly. So, and if it has straps that go around the hind legs, if
Mm,
you're, if you can, I would find one that just has a more secure belly strap so you don't have to mess with the hind
okay.
legs. Or what I
Yeah.
do is
Yeah.
I take the hind leg straps and I tie them together and just put them under the tail. I don't even use them.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I could either take
Yeah,
them
because I
off.
normally cross them, like put them
Yeah,
around one leg and then cross it over. Yeah. Okay.
and it keeps the
Right.
blanket more secure if they're turned out with the rug on. But I go, if they're in a stall overnight, they're not even necessary. And even if they're turned out with the rug on moving around, if you have a short piece under the tail that kind of keeps the back end tight, it doesn't really slip
Mm.
off. It stays on pretty good.
Okay. Okay. Yep. All right, I could try that. Yeah, because that's my concern as well. If he's really annoyed, it's one thing putting the rug on and doing it up at the chest, but then another thing, isn't it, putting it in between his legs? And if he's really pissy,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that would be the safety issue. Usually the belly's okay, the front part's okay, but you can just kind
the
of
back end.
where the leg straps attach to the back, I just put like either baling twine there or I use one of the leg straps and I just tighten up the back end behind
Okay.
behind the hind legs under the tail. And then that
Yeah.
just kind of keeps it from sliding too much.
Okay. Yep. Yep. And I've got a like a single thing. A, a stretchy one. I could put that around the belly, so it kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
keeps it more secure, I suppose. Yep.
Yeah. And like I said, I think with him sort of reverting back to not moving, you haven't really changed the diet or the medication, but he's really stuck again, which speaks to discomfort. And the main thing
Mm,
that's changed has been the weather because
yeah.
you haven't changed the work, you haven't challenged him. And so that's the only reason we're even having this discussion is if it helps him feel more
Yeah.
comfortable, either muscularly or skeletally, from being
Yeah.
warmer, then it'll just help him go through the training through the winter.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay. All right. So yeah, he'll.
if he objects
Yeah.
too much, it's not worth it. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We'll try tonight. See how we go.
Yeah, and just be careful, just sort of understand that he might not be happy about it until he feels some benefit from it. So
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
if it does help, and that's what sort of convinced me to blanket early. Like especially living in
Hmm.
Florida, I put pretty heavy blankets on at 50, 60 degrees, our weather,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it just keeps everybody comfortable drinking. They drink the water better,
Yeah.
and they just seem to do better in the training if I do that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That's good to know. And I suppose even if so I've got so many rugs, it's ridiculous. They've probably got about 10 options each really, but I've
Yeah,
started if it because when we do get rain, it's really heavy.
yeah,
So if I've put a rug on, it'll often just get soaked through, even if it's a like good quality one. So what I've found works better is put a rain sheet, which is kind of just a canvas that's unlined, or
yeah.
with a bit of synthetic in the on the outside, sorry, on the inside, and then on top of that, then I put another good quality canvas over the top, so it's not so much warm, but it keeps the wind and the rain off them. So that even if
Yeah.
he has that, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, even if he has that and that might be something you can leave on if it's not going to get too hot during the day, something like
Mm,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So how so obviously he's wanting to move a little bit in the video. Was
Yeah,
it
so this was last weekend on Sunday we did this, and we got 15 minutes. So he was definitely a whole lot better than he was the previous week where he didn't move. We got moving. Um yeah, so he's going okay there.
it could be too that maybe it's just a normal part of his process to have some times where he loses forward again in the process of restoring his coordination. He looks a lot better moving in this video than even the last one. He's very,
Okay.
he's gently starting to stabilize the pelvis and actually use the hind legs. He looks pretty stiff, but
Mm-hmm.
what's showing is as he's actually using the hindquarters, you start to see how kind of unused they've been. And I had a client mention to me, she used the words healing crisis, which I went, that's such a good term because sometimes when you're making changes like this, you go through a lot of peaks and valleys in the
Mm,
process. And sometimes you feel like you're going backwards, but you're never going backwards. It just
mm,
feels like a setback because the body
yeah.
might be adapting or adjusting in ways that we don't understand fully or
Mm-hmm.
can't see. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if it starts kind of going that direction and it's not a temporary thing, then I look closer at what I'm doing. But with Pablo, we've kind of looked at doing the easiest things possible. So there's not a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of room to go backwards. I go, if,
No.
leading is about as far backwards as you can go.
Yeah.
And the fact that he did better, he was more forward on the long reins, was really encouraging. But that also could create more substantial changes happening through the body because he's getting more
Yeah.
support. And
Yeah.
so it may have nothing to do with the blankets or the cold or anything. He may have just gone, I just don't have the energy for this right now. And
Mm.
even though
Yeah.
you're working him less, which you would think he would have more energy, um, he could have had a who around the pasture. He could
Yeah.
have,
And he does that. He does that a lot. He's quite playful in the paddock. So yeah, who knows? He could hurt himself.
and not even hurt himself, but kind of rapidly exhaust himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, I think that's why he's got quite a round hind end, even though he probably doesn't use it properly. He spends so much time rearing up in his fighting mode with
Yeah.
with one of the other geldings. I think that's why he's quite well developed in the back end.
Yes. Yeah, he's certainly got the muscle. Like his his muscle development and his movement don't match, which is
No, no,
it
I've thought that.
it's what's so fascinating about him. And I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure the reason. It could be if he's good at rearing, he's just not good at
He,
moving, but he's strong enough
he,
to support himself.
yeah. I've often thought that because he does it a lot. So when he's playing with the Arab, and they play fight. Well, the poor Arab doesn't really have a choice, but he play fights. um, and a lot of the time he's rearing up. So I think that's actually what's developed his back end a bit,
Mm,
which is interesting. Yeah.
yes. Yes, it's developed the strength, but not the mobility.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Hmm. And so when you ask him to move, it could be that his strength is more in a stabilizing use rather than a locomotory use. And the
Hmm.
muscle fibers themselves, especially through the back and hindquarters, are sort of equal parts stability and mobility or locomotion. And
Yeah.
it's actually the muscles that stabilize the pelvis and the low back that make the butt so round. And so
Mm.
he's obviously been using that part of the muscle, but not really the locomotory part.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny.
Yeah. But I that could be why he looks so well developed, but
Mm.
doesn't really,
But not really.
well, he controls his movement by not moving
Mm.
because he hasn't quite got stability, the same stability he has rearing or at halt. He can't quite figure out how to feel that stable during motion. And
Yeah. Okay.
that's
Yeah.
what you're working on is that same stability. And he's got the strength for it. He just doesn't know the coordination. How do I
Hmm.
do this? But this video,
Yes.
especially after getting your email of how everything kind of went sideways,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
this actually looks really, really good.
Yeah, I was quite relieved when he managed to do this.
Yeah, and so what I would say with him too is when he slows down like that and he gets heavy, it looked like he was kind of heavy on the outside rein and very slack on the inside.
Hmm.
Try to slow down even a little bit more, even though you're really getting slack in one rein and not both. Try to
Hmm.
slow down enough that the loose rein isn't quite so loose, that both reins
Okay.
have a little bit more tension in them. And even
Yeah.
if it causes him to stop, I think it's the resistance, which is why he does better on the long reins in general compared to just hand walking or leading. I think,
Yeah. So have a little bit more resistance.
yeah, I think he
Yeah.
uses
Okay.
that resistance to find the stability in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so it's going to be almost a painfully slow walk for you to keep the tension in the long reins. But
Yeah.
see how that works, because at least right now
Yeah.
in this video, with the reins pretty loose, he's maintaining forward.
Mm-hmm.
And if you slow down and let the reins have a little bit more tension and he stops completely, then this might be the best you can do for now.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
he's a funny guy, so it may be if you give more rein resistance, he might be able to work longer than what he does on
Mm-hmm.
a loose rein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, he looks really happy when he's working. And so
Yeah. I think he quite likes it.
yeah, and he's cheeky. He goes for his little bite of grass.
Oh, I
Yes,
know.
Chris.
Yeah.
But yeah, he just
I've
looks,
just got to be quicker.
yeah, he looks happy in the work. He looks like he's trying. As he comes towards the camera, you can see that bit of like lateral shakiness when he's walking still.
Mm-hmm.
Let me back it up
Mm-hmm.
just a tick, because right as he was walking to the camera, you could really see it quite clearly after he takes his
Yeah.
nibble.
Yeah. Do you want next time, do you want us to film some footage of him walking straight to the camera?
No, I can see it, but
No.
it's a good moment to really point out. So, do you see when
How he's
he's
going like side to
walking?
side a little bit?
Yeah, so if you want to see it, it's a good angle because you can see through his neck. I'll see if I can pause it. As he comes across the arena off the rail, you can see a little bit of like wobble through his head and neck, and it goes through the
Yeah.
shoulders, through the barrel, and it's just a little bit of a jiggle side to side. Do you see what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah.
That's why increasing the tension on the long reins might help him
Yeah.
maintain forward, because
Yeah.
that little instability, it's you can think of it like for every step he takes, he's spending extra energy sideways.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think that's why he did better on the long reins than he did just hand walking, because even the loose long reins are kind of
Mm.
resisting that side to side
Yeah.
force.
Yeah. Yep.
And so play with different amounts of tension and see what he does.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep.
but that's why I wouldn't change the exercise unless if he completely loses forward on the long reins, I would just try leading him and try to get 5 to 10 minutes of movement, even if you're kind of dragging him a bit. Um, again, because even
Yeah.
if it is uncomfortable, particularly for muscle stiffness and arthritis, the movement is the remedy. Even if
Mm.
it's not a lot
Yeah.
of movement or it's not great movement. It's
Yeah.
like just, short walks, just 5 to 10 minutes of some movement is a little bit like, us yelling at my dad, even on his walker, you got to get up and walk every day, Dad. That's, you got to do this after he had his heart
Yeah.
surgery. And the more he did, the better he felt. But it took a little bit of prodding in the beginning
Mm.
because it was so difficult that even
Mm-hmm.
walking up and down his hallway was enough. And so,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
but especially after major surgeries now, that's the recommendation for people even is don't Don't
Yeah,
get,
interesting.
don't sit around too much. Don't lay down too much. Get up and move as much as you can every
Yeah,
day.
yeah, and that you repair quicker.
Hmm.
Interesting, isn't it? I suppose it gets the body, everything's moving around a little bit more internally, isn't it? And
Yeah,
which is good.
movement is part of how all the systems in the body function better. And so when
Mm,
we're bedridden, it's like circulation reduces, the lymphatic system gets worse, becomes compromised, and it's the same for horses.
hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that's why with him, even if it's not good movement, which like that looks fantastic. This little bit as he's getting into
mm,
he's kind of gotten through the wobbly, like he just looked really steady right there for a tiny bit.
mm.
And
Yeah,
that,
lifted his head up a little bit, didn't he?
hmm like the long and low is good. It's not balanced, but when they have their head low like that, it's kind of a muscular adjustment. And so I don't
Hmm.
discourage it
Yeah,
because I go, they're finding some muscular relief in that posture.
yeah,
But let me
yeah,
just back it up right about here as you come down this long side. He just starts to gradually look more and more stable. And then I'll try to point out, like he goes into long and low. He's a little wobbly
yeah.
there, but he's loosening the muscles and stabilizing the hind legs. And then just there, it kind of kicks in. Like
Yes,
this
yeah,
little bit is the coordination you're looking for. He can't hold it for
yeah.
very long. It's only
No.
a lot of falling apart and a few strides of it coming together.
Hmm. Yeah.
But that's what I mean when I say like a horse learning to balance is kind of like us learning to ride a bike. And in those strides, he really kind of pedaled down the driveway.
Found it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he stayed
Yeah,
upright on the bicycle
yeah.
for
Got
just a
off the
little bit.
training wheels for 2 seconds. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, but even the whole
Oh,
time I'm watching this, he's playing with, really lengthening the neck while he's still in
hmm.
motion, not always eating grass or stopping. And
Yeah.
even if it's only 15 minutes with a nibble here and there, the the consistency of movement is really a huge sign of progress. The fact that he's not
Mm.
stopping all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. I feel like we are very slowly progressing, which is good.
and it's going to be very tedious and slow until you see more of those moments I just pointed out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
happens
I know what I was
is,
gonna,
oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Go
So I was
ahead.
just gonna ask something. So with internal balance, if you had a horse that so for instance, Pablo, right? If we manage to develop up his, or if he manages to develop up his coordination and muscle and whatnot to become balanced, and then say if I put him back in the paddock for, I don't know, 4 months, for instance, and pulled him out, is it something that they kind of maintain themselves once they find their way, or is it that they should always be worked to maintain
No,
balance?
it depends on the muscular development that supports.
Mm-hmm.
So the muscle development always supports how the skeleton is used. It has nothing to do with
Mm-hmm.
speed or working
Yeah.
harder or anything. So it
Yeah.
doesn't, it like even at this slow speed with lots of halting for short periods, you're developing the core muscle at
Mm-hmm.
the same time you're retraining the nervous system into a different coordination. Those two things are happening at the same time.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
at a certain point, and that's what's a little bit unusual about Pablo, because
Mm-hmm.
normally this kind of movement would go hand in hand with a lot more muscle atrophy that where the horse wouldn't look quite as well developed as he looks.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so usually by the time the movement and the muscling of the body look good together. Then if you gave him 4 months off, he would hold it. But
Okay. Yeah.
it's if the movement is still the challenge, which is his case, or the
Yes. Yeah, we're not there. Yeah.
or the muscling wasn't there yet. You could still see angular hindquarters or sunken in spots or, super tight
Mm-hmm.
necks or super tight back muscles. Then the muscles haven't fully adapted yet to the new
Mm-hmm.
coordination. So then if you
Yeah.
gave them 4 months off, they're never going to go all the way back. That's the good news
Mm-hmm.
because changing the coordination to this sort of ideal use, they hold it as much as they possibly can. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even if they lose muscle, the changes of coordination that you've achieved during the training tend to stick
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's
because,
good.
yeah. And sometimes
Yeah.
they can't stick because it's not really like the old habit is still stronger than the new habit. And in that
Yes.
case,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not much of it is going to stick.
Mm-hmm.
But already with him, if he had 4 months off now, you would still start in a better place than we already started.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But he wouldn't be much ahead of where he is now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I used to
Yeah. No,
joke
that's
with
good.
clients that it's almost like the horses do their homework. Um, at a certain point, like when you start to see the moment I pointed out, because
Yeah.
in this whole video, which is about 15 minutes 41 seconds, that
Yeah.
was
There's a few
probably
seconds.
there's a few seconds where it came together. And then let me see if I can find that moment again.
We were going the other way, weren't we? Yeah.
Yeah. Because I want to
Yeah,
say,
about there.
yeah, I want to
That one, I
say
think.
it was after the 10-minute mark. Yeah, there it is.
It's coming,
So
yeah, down
it's
here.
right around 11 to 12 minutes,
Yeah.
and he holds it for less than a minute. But the
Yeah.
fact that he found that coordination, so let's kind of look at it again because it happens exactly like that. It's a happy accident when it happens. You never know when it's going to happen, how long they're going to hold it. But
Yeah.
as you got him through about 10 and a half minutes, just as you're coming
Mm-hmm.
here, as he
Mm-hmm.
comes down this long side, like I went back a little further so we can maybe see how he sets it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I do see in this video more strides like this, where he's almost nose to the ground long and low, but he's still moving.
Mm-hmm.
He's not halting.
Yes. Yeah.
So most horses, when they go that deep at first, they all stop. And the fact that
Mm-hmm.
he's no longer just stopping there, that could be him figuring out this pelvic engagement. Then he stabilizes it. And then here, that's what basic balance sort of looks like. It's not super
Mm-hmm.
fancy, but it's that long
Mm-hmm.
neck, that stability that was coming through the back and hindquarter
Yeah.
for just those few strides, and just that
Yeah.
ease of motion. And it's very
Mm. Feels a
typical.
little bit more forward.
Yeah. And it's actually the natural evolution out of long and low. Um, so
Yeah.
the fact that he did it himself, most with, pretty loose guidance from the long reins, it shows
Yeah.
you he has the strength, but not
Mm-hmm.
yet. Like he just found the coordination and then boom, it was there,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
strides. And then he
Mm-hmm.
goes, okay, now I got to stop. Now I got to fall apart,
Yeah.
you know. But tell me
Yeah.
what you see. Tell me what you see in those strides and without kind of any judgment, just what do you see as he kind of comes out of this long, he's going to go into long and low here, then he's going to come
Yeah.
out of it. So tell me what you
Yeah.
see.
So his head raises a bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like he's got a little less weight on the front end
Yeah, definitely.
and a little less, I don't know if I saw I wasn't really watching the barrel, sorry, but
No, we'll
I
replay
presume
it a
less.
couple of times because
Okay.
you'll see more each time. And
Yeah.
this is part of why I love remote lessons is because we can replay the video.
Yeah, rewind, rewind. Yeah.
Yeah, and really look at the good accidental good steps.
Yeah.
So, what makes you say the forehand looks lighter? What is it that catches your eye? Because you're right. And
Like it kind
so,
of lifts up a little bit.
yeah,
Does it lift up a little bit?
it lifts up
Or like,
with
um,
the neck.
yes.
Yeah, and so there is a
And,
lightness to the front legs for sure.
mm.
And
And I was
so,
just
no,
watching his back legs to see if do they, rather than kind of going a bit more like that, are they more like that?
yes, yes. And that
Yes.
was kind of what
Whereas he's before a bit like that, and now they're like that.
yes. So,
Yeah.
and if you look at the front legs, as the neck elevates, the front legs are lighter. But that same thing that we looked at when he was coming straight at the camera, from a side
Mm-hmm.
view, you not only see
Mm-hmm.
the pelvis rolling a bit, and the
Yeah.
shoulders are also shaking a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the moment that he takes those beautiful strides of just basic balance, it's like
Yeah.
the pelvis gets quiet, the back gets quiet, and the front legs quit sort of shimmying and shaking. Yeah, there.
Yeah.
You see that?
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
flows forward.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then
And
as
I can
he,
feel it. I felt that. I remember at the time I could feel it on the reins. It felt straighter.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or steadier or whatever words we want to
Yes. Yeah.
use. But no, your eye caught
Yeah.
it exactly. The pelvis had less rolling, the back barrel had less rolling, the front legs had less shaking. And so when
Yeah.
he's in long and low, or when he's not quite stable through the hindquarters, even if the neck is level, you see that
Mm-hmm.
lateral shaking. And then just
Yeah.
here, everything gets
Yeah.
organized. It,
Yes.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so when I talk about stability, which I talk about endlessly, that's what I mean. So
Yes.
it's when that midline, the spine and pelvis finally do their job, the limbs get very smooth, the movement through
Yes.
the limbs.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when he was coming straight at the camera and we could see that sort of little bobble through the head, neck,
Yes.
shoulders, all the way back, that's the
Yeah.
instability of the axial skeleton, which means
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
his core muscles are weaker than they should be,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
he looks well developed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. That makes sense.
well,
Reminds me of one of those, those little toy snakes, if you ever had them, and they're on like they're joined together, but you can wriggle them.
yeah,
It's a bit like that.
it's exactly like that. So,
Yeah.
if you wanted to stabilize it, then you reduce that wiggle, right? Depending on what you want to do. But snakes move like that, so you can put a little
Yes.
energy
Yeah.
in. But for
Yeah.
horses, like the horse's leg movement is dictated by whether or not, if we think of their midline like that snake, if the snake
Mm-hmm.
is bending, then the legs have to brace.
Yes.
And if the
Yeah.
snake is steady, then the legs
Yeah.
can move fluidly.
Yes. Yeah. Makes sense.
And he's really working on it, even like way back here, or this is after the good steps. But you can see when he slows down and lengthens the neck, what you may see from your point of view is more stability on either side of the tail.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if you've had time to watch any of the meeting recordings, but we've been talking about engagement and disengagement. And if we sort of define an engaged hindquarter is
Mm-hmm.
really, and I just did a podcast with Deb on the same topic because it's so confusing. We use the term engagement in the horse world all the time,
Mm.
and
And
nobody,
they think just because the hoof lands in the space of the front one, then that's engaged, isn't it? But it's not that at all.
no, it's not
Because
that at all.
Stitch overdoes it, and yet he's like this.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
I point out every single gaited horse on the planet over tracks, and most of them are disengaged. So
Yeah.
what Pablo's doing, like even here, is so the sacroiliac joint, like the little bones right on top of the butt, are the outer
Mm-hmm.
edges of the pelvis. And what
Yep.
we call the point of the hip is another outer edge of the pelvis. And then
Mm-hmm.
the horse's seat bones are basically either side of the tail. So their pelvis sits
Yep.
like that. So the
Mm-hmm.
sacroiliac joint is where the pelvis meets the spine. So
Okay.
that's
Yep.
it's where the pelvis, the upper ischium of the sacrum, top part of the bone, meets, or sorry, of the pelvis. Top part of the pelvis is called the ischium, and then the sacrum is the one of the lower segments of the spine. So that's why it's called the sacroiliac joint. It's where those two bones meet,
Yeah.
and it's
Mm-hmm.
basically two flat surfaces, right? But when they're disengaged, you're getting pressure either side to side or downward on that joint.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it makes the pelvic bones move too much because that joint is not able to really move. I mean, it's not meant to
Yeah.
move
Okay.
at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a disengaged pelvis is when we can see the pelvic bones moving. And
Mm-hmm.
again, if we go back to our favorite little moment, um,
Mm-hmm.
if you watch the top of his hindquarters when you feel in the reins, because you remember feeling it, right? That it just felt
Mm-hmm.
really good. At that same
Mm-hmm.
moment, if you look right in the middle of the butt muscles, you see how there
Yeah.
it just gets stable. And I think
Yeah.
I'm going to do a video and put a dot or something on the X marks the spot because the sacroiliac joint is deep inside of the pelvis.
Yes. Yeah.
And so the only way we can sort of tell if it's engaged or disengaged is it's sort of either side of the tail, about
Mm-hmm.
halfway up to those bony knobs on the top.
Yeah.
So it's about halfway in and halfway
Mm-hmm.
from the tail to the bones, straight down.
Okay. Yep.
And
Yep.
that's the part that has to be stable.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
so that's what I'm seeing in this video when he slows down to a crawl. If you see not only less rocking or less,
Mm-hmm.
forward back movement, you'll start to see kind of where those upper bones are, the tuber sacrali, and into the middle of the muscle. That's the area
Mm-hmm.
that should look super stable, like almost
Okay.
we visually we shouldn't see any movement there.
Yep.
And that's like here when he goes to lengthen his neck or when he went through those good steps, you can start to really look at that area. Because of course he has the strength to stabilize it when he's standing on his hind legs, right? That's why
Yeah.
he looks good.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah.
motion, it suddenly becomes very unstable in that area.
Yes. Okay. Yep.
And so when he slows down, if it's becoming more stable, he's actually getting more engaged. And
Yeah.
we don't, because of that over tracking thing, we don't think when they go slow that they're becoming more engaged, but he absolutely is.
Yeah.
And that's why now, if he really releases the tension through the neck and the top line muscles, he can keep moving even though it's slow. And that used to cause him to stop completely because he was unstable up here.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So we're progressing at snail's pace, but we're going forward, aren't we?
You're getting more progress than you realize. That's why I just went over that
Yeah.
whole detail, is
Yeah.
because I'm seeing a lot more stability through his hindquarter, whether he's fast or slow, whether the neck is long or short. And to see
Mm-hmm.
even those few steps where he really pulled his balance together, that
Mm-hmm.
is massive progress. That's not a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
progress. I go, the speed is
Yeah.
slow, but his coordination is changing rapidly. It just hasn't,
Yeah.
it hasn't gotten, the new coordination isn't sort of familiar enough that it gives him
Enough.
any
No.
power yet. It's
Yeah.
he's just kind of new at it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's in
But
there.
that's good to know though. And when I'm working him, if I kind of focus on that area that you're talking about, I'll then have more experience to kind of pick up when it is moving and not moving. Because at the moment, I'm kind of just looking at him generally, I suppose, behind him.
Hmm. No, and if you kind
Yeah,
of
and I'll.
zero in on that area,
Mm-hmm.
you'll start to know, it might help your confidence, like, okay, I understand this is hard for you, but could I push you to give me a few steps? Do you know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? It's going to maybe change
Yeah.
your perspective a little bit on when to
Yeah.
push and when to back off.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I would call it not pushing as much as I would call it. Oh, it got all fuzzy. I don't know what happened to the video. I'm going to pause
Mm.
it for a second. Um,
Yeah.
Productive discomfort versus
Mm-hmm.
making them do it. Because
Yes.
it,
Yeah.
if you increase the rein tension and he loses a little bit of forward, but that area increases its stability, it moves less, then I would
Yeah.
say play with that a little bit, even if
Mm-hmm.
he stops more frequently again, or even if he's a little bit slower. You kind of
Yeah.
watch that area of the hindquarters to know if you're really tucking into a key issue for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I'll do that.
Yeah.
And I'll try and increase to 20 minutes as well when I do it this weekend. We'll see how we go.
Yeah, and it may
He's
be,
classic though. Oh, sorry.
go ahead. What's classic?
I was just going to say he's classic at knowing the time. Like, did you notice where he stopped a minute ago, just before that happened? So we were going to do 15 minutes, and my daughter said, "Okay, we're at 15 minutes," and I said, "Okay, well maybe we'll just try for 20 because he's going okay." Well,
And he
he then
went,
come around the corner. He
oh,
just
yeah.
stopped. He went, I can't do it."
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you may have to play with the time frames, but it might actually benefit you because he might only be able to go 5 minutes if he can do 5 minutes with a lot of stability.
Yeah.
Or he may do better if you go 15 minutes, but you're not as precise. Like
Yeah.
you can kind
Yeah.
of let
Play
him
around with that a
guide,
little bit.
yeah, and let him guide you a little bit. Does he
Hmm.
prefer a shorter period of time with more stability? Maybe
Yeah.
more stability allows him to work longer. You don't know yet.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And he's pretty obvious at telling me what he thinks. He makes it pretty obvious. So, oh no,
Yeah.
he'll just stop and he won't go.
But the more you
Yeah,
kind of understand what's going on in his body and you can kind of visually assess different things, it'll help you
yeah.
know I need to push him a little bit or I really shouldn't push him.
Mm.
Because if I
Yeah.
push a horse and they suddenly become less stable, I instantly know don't push that horse at all. And
Yes.
some
Yeah.
horses, if I push them a little bit and they get more stable, then I go, okay,
Yeah.
they need a little encouragement.
hmm Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. Awesome. Good, good.
Great. Okay, let me stop the record. Oops, where'd it go? There we go. I don't know why. I think they've changed.